So I'm just going to go through this background information about the author and some historical context before we start reading. I figured there's a better shot of you listening to me reading it than you reading it on your own. So here we go. Let me turn off my notifications. Okay. Thomas Laner Williams, later known as Tennessee Williams, was born in Columbus, Mississippi in 1911. His family moved around frequently, first in Mississippi and then to a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri, where Williams spent most of his school years. He did not get along with his father, a traveling salesman. His mother, Edwina, was overbearing and somewhat hysterical, although supportive of her son's desire to write. Williams also had a younger brother, Dakin. His older sister, Rose, was one of the most important figures in his life, and Williams and others described her as beautiful, sweet, and highly intelligent. However, she also suffered from schizophrenia, which worsened as she got older. And Rose is going to be paralleled to our character, Laura, Tom's sister in the story that we're going to be reading. In 1929, he graduated from the University City High School and enrolled at the University of Missouri. He transferred to several other schools and had to take 2 years off from college to work, but he did finally graduate in 1938 from the University of Iowa with a Bachelor of Arts degree. The most devastating event of his life occurred before this, though. In 1937, his parents authorized a prefrontal lobotomy for Rose. If you're not sure what that is, look it up, who was growing more paranoid and troubled. The procedure involved inserting an ice pick through the patient's eye socket to sever nerves that joined the prefrontal cortex to the rest of your brain. It's supposed to relieve psychiatric strain, but instead it completely destroyed Rose mentally. She was never able to care for herself again. It also broke her brother's heart, Williams, and caused him to suffer his own mental collapse. He would later say that the difference between himself and Rose was that he had a way to deal with his fragile mental state. He could write. He turned Rose's suffering into a short story, the play, The Glass Menagerie, which we're going to be reading. Laura, Tom's fragile, sensitive sister in the play, suffers from a personality disorder just like his real sister Rose did. Tom is unable to escape from his memories of Laura and his guilt of abandoning her. The Glass Menagerie made Williams famous as a playwright. It premiered in 1944 and received excellent reviews. It then won Critics' Award. In an essay that accompanies the play, he notes that he had difficulty dealing with this new fame and escaped to Mexico for a time to write. In the 60s, he suffered a mental breakdown, and his later works did not receive critical praise, but he did continue to write. And he died in 1983 in New York City. So, some background information. It says Tennessee Williams called The Glass Menagerie a memory play. It is a dramatic rendering of the memories of the narrator, Tom Wingfield, because he is not an objective director or narrator. The play unfolds in an impressionistic, highly symbolic fashion. The play contains characters very clearly drawn from his own life, although the play's purpose is not autobiography. Rather, he seeks to show how any artist can engage mental and emotional pain through the process of art itself. So some social and historical background of the play. So Tom, as a narrator, conscious of his own role in the play, deliberately sets the action in a very specific time and place. The historical events of the 1930s seem very distant to the Wingfields, yet they are symbolically linked to the internal changes through which the family goes. In Scene 1, Tom describes sporadic labor riots in American cities, the bombing of Guernica in Spain, and the declining economy, establishing the time of the play as 1937. The Great Depression is keeping the country's economy stagnant. Labor disputes in big cities hint at the unrest that will soon upset the balance of the whole world and start World War II. So, the Great Depression is the first major historical context and historical link here. Through the 1920s, there was wild speculation in the stock market all over the world. Eventually, it collapsed and the stock market crashed on October of 1929. Unemployment eventually reached 25%. This is also very relevant to what we're dealing with right now. The Great Depression changed the political balance in the U.S. President Herbert Hoover, unable to provide solutions to this catastrophe, lost the 1932 election to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt immediately instituted a series of economic initiatives that are collectively called the New Deal. The reforms of the New Deal showed tolerance toward labor unions and workers' rights. Although the American economy improved a little through the 1930s, 1937, which is the year the Glass Menagerie takes place, saw another recession. There were labor riots in the U.S. So since the late 1800s, there had been ongoing tension in both Europe and America between large, powerful corporations and groups of workers trying to organize into unions. The unions tried to use the power of numbers to bargain for higher salaries, better working conditions, and better job securities. The corporations tried to protect their own interests. Early in the 20th century, the plight of workers and trend toward unionism led also to the promulgation of socialist economic and political theories, resulting in civil wars in Russia and Spain, and the establishment of the socialist governments, most of which slowly devolved into totalitarian states. The 1930s saw worldwide political and economic tensions increase as the Great Depression forced people into an economic depression. Okay, I'm not going to read all of this to you. But I'm going to skip here. So they're talking here about more specific union strikes, which you can read through if you want to. But the bombing of Guernica in 1937, which is the same year that this play is going to take place, is mentioned several times in the play. Guernica was a town in Spain that was heavily bombed by a combination of German and Spanish forces during the Spanish Civil War. Revolutionaries were trying to overthrow a leftist coalition that had won the 1936 elections. It says that in the Glass Menagerie, Tom himself is a young man forced by economic necessity, exacerbated by the abandonment of his own father, to work in the warehouse of the Continental shoemakers, which, if you hopefully watch the videos about his personal life, this very much relates. Tom has little power over his own job or life, but instead of joining a movement, he escapes from the endless labor and mental tedium through books and movies. Okay, so his mother is constantly nagging him about his job and making money, and she's also saying, "Why are you always at the movies?" Okay, so a lot of this you're going to see reflected in the play. And again, it's not necessarily an autobiography, but a memory play. And a lot of the characters, well, there are 4 characters total, but these all parallel. Tom is Tennessee. Laura in the play would be his sister Rose in real life. And Amanda Wingfield, the mother in the play, would obviously be his mother in real life. So there are themes and motifs here that you should look out for. The absent father. His father is never in the play at all, but there is a picture of him hanging in the living room, kind of reminding them that he left them. So it says Williams draws on his own childhood when depicting the Wingfield family, which is exactly what I just said. And his ideas about fathers are not favorable. Okay. It says, to what extent is Tom doomed to repeat the actions of his father, like to abandon his family? And to what extent does the audience's sympathy with Tom help us to understand Tom's own father? Okay. Artistic temperament. It says his sister Rose in real life was mentally fragile, suffering from schizophrenia, and eventually had this lobotomy, which we talked about earlier, which permanently disabled her. So Tennessee loosely bases the character of Laura on Rose. Okay. So let's see. Also, look for the reference to magic and illusions. They talk about a magic trick, or Tom talks about a magic trick he saw where the man was able to get out of a coffin without removing one nail. So think about what that could parallel in his life in the story. Okay, so also some symbols. The Glass Menagerie is a symbol. The Menagerie is a collection of glass animals that his sister is obsessed with, because she is living in this fantasy world of not having to deal with the real world. Let's see. Yeah, it says the glass animals serve as a preoccupation that allows her to avoid venturing into the harsh outside world. So she escapes kind of into this little fantasy world. Okay, so that's kind of just a lot of the intro stuff that needed to be talked about before we started reading. I'm also going to attach a link to a Prezi and make sure you're keeping up with everything. Sounds good. Bye, guys.